Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another Babbling review. Myself, Mike, and Sloth today, dissecting a 1-1 draw against Aston Villa. Frustrating one to take. I think we performed very well in the first half. Second half, obviously, we got pinned back a little bit, slightly adjusted how we were playing, and I think just run out of steam. And I think the Villa tactics from Emery in the second half were spot on, but we'll break that down very closely as we go through the stream. And yeah, it's obviously not with the lack of controversy around it as well, surrounding officiating and the VAR situations we had to endure. Obviously, 3 disallowed goals during the match. So plenty to discuss, plenty coming up in the review show. So make sure to leave a like on the video if you enjoy. Let's start with the lineups. Wasn't too much to be not expected. I think most people will probably say that is our strongest 11 now at the moment, with Emerson coming back in at left back. Obviously, Areola came in between the sticks. So really, that was probably on paper our strongest 11. Would you agree, Sloth?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's definitely what we want to try and finish the season starting with most of the time. Going into most matches ahead, I think that is our strongest side. And it's, for a lot of the complaining about negative football, which there's a lot of, I think that is when we play our best stuff.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think I think it was the right intent from David Moyes. He was trying to make it as positive as he could from the get go. So yeah, I don't think any West Ham fan looked at that lineup and was like, maybe that shouldn't be the case there. I think that was completely justified lineup. Obviously, Antonio led the line. We had Kudus and Bowen either side, Paqueta back in the middle. So plenty to be positive about. But we'll get on to what happened next. So yeah, obviously Villa had their injuries, they had their suspensions, so we knew that it was going to be a slightly weakened Villa side, but still a lot of strength in depth. I think that's the difference, and we probably saw as well yesterday the difference between the two, squads rather than the first 11. I think we've said it, multiple times on this channel. Our first 11 is actually very, very good. It's able to compete with the likes of Aston Villa, when we're looking at just that first 11 perspective. But it's when you get into the squad depth, it's when you look at those options you have on the bench or rotation. If you've played Europe 3 days later, it's what can you do off of the bench, which has been an issue for us this season. So not just this season, but throughout David Moyes' tenure at West Ham. So started the game well. I think it was a bit scrappy to start with, but we started to pick up on how Aston Villa were trying to play out from the back. I don't think Longley in particular at the back looked very comfortable on the ball. Obviously, being a left-footed, right-sided centre-back is never easy. And he just didn't look comfortable. I think they tried to build out, from the back a few times, but we were pretty on it. Similar to the Freiburg situation, I think David Moyes done his homework. One interesting tweak that he did do was moving when we didn't have the ball. Bowen was kind of coming central into that Douglas Luiz area, and Kufal was just pressing really, really high up onto their left back. And I think Moyes really done his homework there, and it was working really, really well and being effective because they just couldn't really play out. There was a couple of times where they played for our midfield way too easy, but in general, I thought we did really, really well defensively. And Villa really weren't creating much or getting through. So what did you make of the first kind of 10, 15 minutes, Slough? Were you happy with how we approached the game?
I thought we looked really sharp. It was just a case of making sure that we tidy out a lot of the errors that we see, because we started positively, but as anyone who's watched us this season will tell you, we've got an error in us. And I think that was the kind of really positive start we want, particularly going into games like Leverkusen. But we just want to see more of the same across 90 minutes. And I think that was what was disappointing about the game. But I digress slightly. I think Sufal looked really sharp. He's been giving us that outlet on the right-hand side and support for Bowen over the last few weeks that I think is when we get the best out of the side. But I think Mavropanos looked pretty solid as well. Obviously, he is one of the more error-prone players that we have at the back, but yeah, well, that's the problem. But I think he looked pretty solid. He seems to be growing into the side, and I think when we finally get him a defensive partner who can run, I think that we'll really see a step up more.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think I think we played pretty well in that first half, especially leading up to when we took the lead just before the half-hour mark. Obviously, as you mentioned, Kufal was excellent yesterday, and he's been very, very good so far this season in general. And I think, last season, obviously playing with the injury in and out the team, just wasn't who we know Kufal has been for us in the first 2-3 seasons at West Ham. And this season, he started to rediscover that attacking form from fullback, and I think he's only behind Trippier now for assists from right back in the Premier League. So he's up to 7 assists, and that's how the goal came. I thought we worked it really, really well. I think, as you mentioned, Kufal was up and down in that first half particularly, and we were causing them some issues over there. I think they were struggling. I think when you look at in the midfield, obviously Douglas Luiz and Tillemans, they're not naturally defensively gifted players, and I think that kind of showed when we're trying to get them in transitions, when we had the ball, is the gaps and spaces were just way too big for Villa in that first half, and I think we exploited it really well. I think we picked up the spaces, we moved it wide, we overlapped when we could, and that's what Kufal did for our goal. Obviously, it came out to him on the right-hand side. He puts in an outstanding cross into the middle, like absolutely perfect between the defenders and the goalkeeper. And Antonio's there for not a tap in. It was a very good header into the bottom right-hand corner, but a finish you'd expect him to make once he gets into that position. And also you have to credit Antonio there because he's made the run in between those, between that centre back and right back. They haven't picked him up, and he's been there to head home first. And, it gave us the lead after half an hour. And I think on the balance of it, Sloth, it was probably thoroughly deserved.
Yeah, no, I thought we definitely had the better chances of the teams in the first half, and I think the pace that Kudus, Bowen, and Antonio possessed, pressing their back line was what was really, I think, surprising for their defenders. It was the work rate as well, and that delivery from Sufal can't be praised high enough. Antonio just has to direct it, and whether he does that with his head or with his foot, it's a goal. He just has to make contact with it. That's how good the delivery is. But really, really pleased with how we started the first half and how we looked. They did have a couple of chances, and obviously we'll get onto the penalty decisions and shouts over the course of the video. But I think that sort of playing style is really what West Ham fans want to see going forward, and how we get the best out of our front three as well.
Yeah, definitely. Mike, what did you make of the first goal? Because I know it was, and just how we kind of approached the game from the start, because I think it was not surprising to take the lead against Aston Villa in the circumstances of how we were playing.
No, I think it was on the balance of play, I don't think any Villa fan could say that they warranted, to go in at half-time 1-0 up at all. What we did brilliantly is we kept funneling them into essentially positions where they could give the ball away. Emi Martinez gave the ball away so many times, and I think even before we scored, Souček, had his touch been better, he maybe been able to have then chipped the goalkeeper, or maybe had he been a bit more aware of the situation, he may have hit it first time to lob Martinez. But that goal, the ability to cross as he did, Sufal was great, and he was brilliant 1v1 all game, both from an attacking sense, from a defending sense. Probably one of the hardest games their left back has had. He was left high and dry by Rodgers. Rodgers was vastly ineffective, and I think that's also why Bowen tucked in as well. He tucked in to kind of follow Rodgers, but also kind of be close to David Luiz. And it worked brilliantly, absolutely brilliant. I can't fault Moyes for that first half, really, because he got it absolutely spot on. We've criticised him a lot, but we showed really good intent off the ball, showed brilliant intent, went on the ball. A little bit of luck maybe going our way would have been a bit different, but, that cross from Sufal was one of the best he's probably going to put in all season. And Antonio, absolutely, we've talked about it before, sometimes when we've watched us defend, that the attacker wanted it more, and Antonio wanted that more than the defender. He got himself ahead, put himself where arguably he could be, in danger of getting kicked. and he went for it, and he fully deserved that goal. He was, again, this is the Antonio we've been talking about, 2 years ago? The type of player that's not going to flop when he gets a bit of pressure. He wants the ball. is coming in, he's moving out into the channels at the right times. He was playing in that first 45 minutes the perfect centre forward role. Watkins just couldn't get a kick really. He had to come so deep to get the ball, and when he did, we managed to get back. And we did give ourselves a little bit of defending to do, but we did really good scramble defending when we needed to. And yeah, like I say, that first half we were absolutely brilliant. And I felt I'll talk about it now, but I felt Antonio was really hard done by when it came to our second goal, shall we say, where Mo wins the ball in the box and then has a shot. But what was frustrating is at the time in the game, being there in the crowd, being where I sit, I thought the ref had called it out for a handball against Kudus, because the ball stinked up, hits him in the thigh, and then obviously he shoots so quickly. And at the time I thought, he's called it out for a handball, and that's why it's been called back. But then when you review it back, he's actually done it for a foul on Emi Martinez. And to say it's a foul is beyond a joke. Antonio backs up like any centre forward would. The way he backed up was not a foul. And then when the ball comes in the box, Martinez essentially just flaps. The ball, I think, is headed by one of their players, headed kind of away. He just flaps his arms as he tries to come around Antonio. Antonio does nothing. Antonio just literally stands there. He just moves over, doesn't back in, doesn't put his arms out, does very little to impede the goalkeeper. I'm going to say impede because there was no foul. He didn't foul him. He didn't barge. He merely, because it was a mild inconvenience. And we see worse than that when goalkeepers come out, thump the ball, and it's not a foul, or come up and catch. It was less than that. And
it wasn't a foul. I think that's the
what was frustrating as well was the fact that if it was a foul on Martinez, and like it normally is with a goalkeeper, that is an immediate whistle.
There's no advantage.
Yeah, but he waited, the ball went to Tielemans, was happy to play on, and this moment that Tielemans chipped it and it went into Mo, and as Mo was about to shoot, he blew his whistle. If anything, he should have allowed that situation to go, and then it should have been reviewed by VAR.
Also, there was no real advantage for playing on there in that situation. Like you say, if a goalie gets impeded, they're straight on the whistle. So if anything, that's the second phase of play anyway, and it wasn't a foul.
It was just hit it up the pitch to no one.
I was having this sort of chat with some of the Villa fans on Twitter, and I think what's really frustrating is when you see decisions like that go against you, you just know full well that a top four side is going to get, they're going to get the decisions that go against you every single day. With the Emerson handball penalty situation, which in my opinion was rightly not given. I don't think there's nobody who's played football is going to look at that and say his arm's in an unnatural position, because he's literally gesturing to where, if he was up here going play the ball like that, get over to the centre circle and waving his arms about, you'd go, yeah, that's unnatural. But he has to communicate with his defenders, and it's the inconsistency, because I think every single fan watching that would go, a Liverpool gets that, City gets that, Arsenal get that. And when you see such a soft foul given on the keeper, you just know that, top teams are going to get that. But when we've seen Areola get absolutely clattered by Ollie McBurney, end up with, a facial injury because of it, and you think, wait a minute, so that's not a foul on the keeper, but this is. It's the inconsistency that is absolutely baffling, and it just speaks volumes about how fan bases are getting so annoyed with the officials at the moment.
I think also raise flags as well. They're meant to play on, but there was probably some really, some fairly tight calls where we were kind of getting behind the high line, and the flag went up so quickly. Yet the argument, they're meant to play on and then review it afterwards. However, it just seemed to be, as that first half wore on, they wanted to be far more evident within the game. And they were actually I felt the officials actually were having quite a good first half. But as it started to draw to the close, you kind of then they're becoming more noticeable. And that's a bit of always a worry when they become far more noticeable. And you also then start to think, well, you're meant to let the game kind of go if it's if a player's borderline offside.
I think for me, it's the most. I think the most.
You could have played that one out and then had VAR review it, because there was no way near enough contact. Like, I would, if that was on Areola, I would be like, mate, Areola, you need to be stronger there. I wouldn't be turning around going, that's a foul. I'd be like, you've messed up. You've not pushed the player. As a goalkeeper, you get quite a few leniencies. You were able to pretty much shove a player out of the way to come out. Martinez had no desire in which to do that. He absolutely outright was going to feign at any point a foul, because that's what Emi Martinez is. He's one of those guys that gives it the big unlucky. He's a proper hard man, but the moment someone fronts up, everything crawls up and goes back inside him. He's just a mouth, and I think we saw that in the game.
I think the most frustrating thing for me,
he's as a personality, he's weak.
I think the most frustrating thing for me was the fact that the moment that happened, where that second goal went in, we were completely on top of Villa. And we obviously saw Emery switched it at half time, which we'll get into, but the timing of that goal would have been so perfect to go in 2-0. And as well, the fact that he's blown the whistle before Kudus even strikes the ball, when he's about to strike the ball, means that they can't then go back and look at the foul or supposed foul on Martinez as well, which is the most frustrating thing.
Martinez didn't even, appeal.
There was no appeal.
Yeah,
like he knew. Oh, hang on, I've messed up here. I need to get back in and try and save it.
Well, we're talking about some of the decisions, and you're talking about the offside calls. I was always taught when I did my refs exam that a late flag is a great flag. Your official is only there to give an offside, and in this day and age, when you have a VAR system that is meant to basically, eliminate any sort of offside goal, I don't understand why an official has to get involved unless it is clear and obvious. We had the same thing with Burnley last week when we had a debatable offside given against Bowen, and we broke and we looked dangerous, but the flag seemed to go up straight away. And now, when you have a video system, surely you should be utilizing that as best as you can. And that doesn't mean taking power away from the referee. What it means is that the referee has a crutch he can use. Now, he should let play flow. And if they can, allow it to play on, and unless it is a clear and obvious foul, which, in my opinion, it wasn't. Look, contact on the goalkeeper is one thing, but as I mentioned earlier, it's incredibly frustrating to see the inconsistency with that. But the fact that you can blow up about that after you've tried to play an advantage, instead of just letting the play continue, and if you deem it to be a foul, do it during the VAR review.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like the referees want to be seen to make a good call instead of actually allowing the video system to do its job.
And what I find interesting is if that's a foul on Emi Martinez, right, which is what arguably is being said by the referee, because it was a handball on Kudus, he would have pointed to his arm when he was moving away from the incident and it would have indicated to a player. There was none of that. So what I find interesting is that's a foul on Emi Martinez. Now, had Emi Martinez done exactly the same action to Antonio, it would not be a foul.
Yeah.
So, how is that a foul on the goalkeeper who's not a foul on an outfield player?
I've just never seen a referee give a foul like that to a goalkeeper so far away from when it happens. Like it's usually immediate. So that's where people were getting confused that maybe Kudus handballed it. That's what I think everyone's reaction inside the ground was. Yeah. So. That's what's most frustrating. Obviously, it wasn't meant to be. We went in 1-0 at half time. And I think we just carried on the momentum from Thursday. And it was evident that we had a clear plan. We weren't, like you mentioned, Mike, Martinez was taking way too long on the ball. He weren't being allowed to play out. It was very sideways-ish from Villa. And when it did come into the centre-backs, Mavropanos was excellent. He was excellent at marshalling that defence. And we just played really, really well in that first half. I think I was really happy to see how we'd nullified Emery's, tactics, shall you say, in that first half. But obviously the second half was a completely different story for multiple reasons. From a tactical perspective, obviously they brought in Diaby and Cash for Longley and Duran, which was an attacking change. And it was probably obvious that as the game went on, that sort of pace and that sort of attacking intent was going to push us back a little bit. And it was a gamble from Emery because it was still only 1-0. He was obviously going to be less defensively secure in that situation by bringing on these two types of players. But I just think it would have been, it would have been interesting to see if we'd got that second goal, whether Emery would have made the same changes, because I think he would have. And I think that's what makes Emery a very good manager. He's very good at analysing what's going on in a situation. And I think in the second half, we have to give Emery a lot of credit because Villa were excellent in the second half at pushing us back and playing out. And I think we just stepped off it a little bit, whether that was fatigue. I think also the substitution from Antonio, which we'll get onto. But we obviously had the second goal that was disallowed. Antonio, 5 minutes into the second half, the corner comes in. Looks like it glances Antonio's arm on the way through, and rightfully given in your eyes, guys, for a handball.
Yeah, look, with the way the law is, there's clear contact. It is minimal, it's accidental, but it hits his hand, and by the letter of the law, it is handball. So from where I sit, I was down the other end at an angle, so it looked like it just glanced Antonio. It looked like he had zero idea of what was happening when it kind of went in anyway. And you kind of look at it and go, right, well, it's hit his hand. It's just the smallest of touches, but the law is the law in that regard. And you go, you kind of, you take it. But at that point, you also felt, well, we're 5 minutes in. We're clearly creating chances. We've had the ball in the back of the net 3 times today. Another opportunity is going to come. You kind of could accept it because of how we were playing. Obviously, after that, the tail of the game kind of changed a bit because Diaby, and as you say, Emery made a brilliant choice by bringing on Diaby and bringing on Cash. Diaby was allowing Watkins to stay forward. He was dropping into midfield to help them get the ball through. That's what they didn't have beforehand. Duran just doesn't have the same football IQ as Diaby, and Diaby, by doing what he was doing, was enabled them to kind of break through a lot more and made them a far more threatening proposition. So, hats off to Villa in the second half. They were utterly brilliant in some aspects. Didn't create maybe as much as you would probably expect. However, they made for a very dangerous opposition in that second half. We defended resolutely. However, we shot ourselves in the foot, really, with how kind of deep we got. That was partially due to how well Villa were playing, but it was also how we were, and the change of taking Antonio off is all well and good, but in a game where you've got robust centre-backs who are winning kind of long balls, and we also kind of changed how we was playing the long ball and using the ball to kind of get behind. All of a sudden, we were hitting it to a point where Bowen had to challenge in the air, which we didn't do as much with Antonio. We've said it before, if you're going to kind of play that way, of the 3 that was left on in the attacking positions, you kind of have to use Paqueta because he is the one who can win area balls. He can hold it up.
And I thought that's what Moyes was going to do, to be honest. I thought he was going to do that and maybe bring in Ben Johnson either into central midfield and play Paqueta slightly forwards, or I just think putting Ben Johnson out on that right-hand side to start with and putting Bowen striker wasn't the call. I think bringing on Ben Johnson in that environment is fine when you need a bit of fresh legs in the midfield. If you don't really trust Ward-Prowse to do defensive work that maybe Ben Johnson would do, I'd have no issue with Ben Johnson slotting into that midfield and keeping the front 3 of Kudus and Bowen with Paqueta in the middle. But that's what I think, because at that exact point as well, just 2 minutes before that, they'd made another double change. Obviously, Zaniolo came on for Rodgers and Digne came on for Moreno. So it was some really attacking changes from Emery, and they were really pinning us back. Obviously, Digne and Cash were on at this point, so they were just overlapping at every opportunity. As you mentioned, Diaby was very clever with how he was doubling up on the right-hand side with Leon Bailey over the other side, and it allowed Watkins to kind of roam around, although I didn't think he was that effective. It just gave Bailey and Diaby a little bit more license to get forwards, and Cash was doing excellently offensively as well. So they were pushing us back. And then eventually the goal actually came from really us giving the ball away cheaply. Paqueta, who I mean, it might be a controversial one, but I don't think it was his best game yesterday at all. I think he wasn't nowhere near at the standards he needs to be. Gives the ball away by we've said, look, we like Paqueta playing these passes, but the pass was just so bad into Martinez. It was really, really bad. And then they just counter, break. We don't have the legs. Diaby does. He takes it around our fullback and crosses it for Zaniolo to score. It's 1-1, and suddenly we're up against it with 20 minutes to play.
I think what we saw was the difference between a good manager, someone who's set up from the start really well and caught them out, and a great manager who has seen how that setup's affected the game and reacted to it.
Do you think there's also a lack of options for us in the squad, though, to argue that? Because look at the bench.
I think that's something that I've said for seasons now. However, I think you have to hold your hands up and say that Moyes has had time to pick players he wants, and a lot of the players. If it was that case, then why is he bringing Ben Johnson on and taking Antonio off instead of keeping that consistency and maybe saying to someone like Ings, you're going to go up top, but I want you to drop deep and link up with the others around you. But
we've also sat here and said, look, playing Ings solo striker never works, won't work.
I think if you bring on Ings, you effectively have to go for a 4-4-2. So you probably turn around and say, Paqueta, I need you to be alongside Ings when we have possession. However, once we lose it, I need you to drop straight back into midfield. I think that's how you play that. I don't think you can bring on Ings as a thing, but we had the conversation in our WhatsApp on the day, but it was all the football cliches, right? It's a game of two halves. It was a tale of two benches, but there was a level of jealousy I had by seeing the level of player they could bring off from their bench, whereas
it was night and day, wasn't it?
I think Johnson did a great job coming on a defensive role and adding that energy. However, we lost so much in an attacking sense. We lost every time the ball went forward, it would come back because we had.
But we're saying we're kind of defending Moyes and we're defending the recruitment. But again, we're coming back to the point that not having another forward who suits us is directly down to the owners, but also it's also down to Moyes because he's turned down multiple strikers in the past.
I'm not defending our recruitment.
or not moved quick enough for them.
Yeah, it's both, isn't it? I think that was the frustrating thing yesterday. Was just, again, it comes down to the striker situation where we just don't have that Antonio replacement, younger model, stronger, fitter, faster, etc., to do what Antonio did so regularly and so consistently a few years ago. And Antonio's been out injured for a long time. He's come back in this last week, played a few games. He's obviously going to be knackered. I think he put a lot into Thursday night. He's obviously put a lot into that first 65 minutes against Aston Villa, who, especially for the first 20 minutes of the second half, just didn't give us a sniff of the ball. Obviously, they had about 70% possession by the time the game was finished. So, yeah, I think it comes down to two things. I think we have to 100% sit here and say Emre decided to change things and had the options to do it. But he also tweaked it tactically. It's not just like throwing players on and hoping for the best. He understood that we had areas of weakness and we were weakening with our squad because obviously we've demanded a lot from these players and we've said it time and time again. The more we play in Europe, we need a better squad and we don't have that rotation. And the issue is we're relying on the same sort of 11, 12, 13 players week in, week out to play, a game every 3 days, which just isn't sustainable at this level to compete in the Premier League and Europa League. So when you put in such a big effort against Freiburg 3 days before, you can't then rotate much. And you look at your bench and, Emre's got these changes he can make. He can rotate in and out for Europe and Premier League. We just can't or won't do that. And that's down to the investment of the squad, but it's also down to how we've managed transfer windows. Now, I'm not sitting here and saying Ben Rama and Fornals were setting the world alight, but if you're going to let them go, bring in a replacement. The recruitment has to be right there because imagine we had a winger to bring on yesterday instead of Antonio to put, either Bowen striker or Kuda striker. If we brought in a left winger, it completely changes the dynamic of how we're setting up. We're not bringing on Ben Johnson to just sit as effectively a right winger in front of Kufau to drop back a right wing back. It would be completely different. I'm not saying Moyes would have made that substitution because that's a completely different thing. But yeah, I think the options we had were clearly inferior to Aston Villa's squad. And I think Villa have recruited in large a lot better than us over the past couple of seasons in terms of squad depth. Not from a physically starting 11 point of view. I think we matched them there, but I think overall as a squad they are much better than us, and it's probably why they can compete in the Premier League a lot better than us this season and on Europe. So yeah, I think it was frustrating, and then a kind of wave of controversy followed this after it went 1-1. I think most West Ham fans would take the point at that situation with the way the game was playing out. Obviously, we looked very, very leggy. But then we have the first frustration of maybe 4 or 5 is the Edson Alvarez booking, who is now going to be suspended for the next 2 games. I mean, can you wrap your heads around? I think this was the turning point for the referee here in terms of losing control of the game, because why has Alvarez been booked there? What is his thinking there?
There is no thinking other than Alvarez stood up. Alvarez stood up aggressively, but which isn't really a surprise when he's almost being trampled on by Zaniolo, which I did also find quite amusing that like a 6'1", 6'2" Italian pretty boys fronting up to a 6'3" hard as now Mexican, that if he actually went to throw down, only one of them is ending on the floor, and it ain't going to be the guy who's not done both his knees in recent seasons. But it was ridiculous. It was absolutely at that stage the ref was starting to lose it. He was giving yellow cards out for absolute nonsense, and we'll get on to why it was nonsense and why his nonsense led to him bottling a big decision, which actually wasn't a big decision. No, I'll say what it was. He gives Zaniolo a yellow card. Later on, Zaniolo deliberately wastes time and throws the ball away. That was the second yellow card.
Yeah.
He gave a yellow card for Mavropanos for actually
2 minutes before that.
He booted the ball up in the air out of frustration, but he did kick it in the direction of Villa where the ball needed to go.
It's a yellow card.
It was an exaggerated kick in the air. He gave a yellow card. Now, consistency says you've just done that for a dissent with Mavropanos. Obviously, Zaniolo got a yellow card for being, let's say, overly aggressive or overly enthusiastic with Alvarez. And then when he time wasted, probably not even 5 minutes later, he bottled it. Absolutely bottled it. If he was not on a yellow card, he's given him a card. The fact that he decided that because it was about the 89th minute or whatever it was, not to do it is ridiculous. But let's also remember, this is the referee that saw a foul in the 2-2 in the game that we ended up losing to Chelsea. The Cornet goal that was never given. This is the same referee who called that as a foul.
Yeah,
so,
and also just before that happened as well, there was obviously the Douglas Luiz incident where they're kind of back. Kudus has the ball, obviously backing up into him, shrugging him off, and then for some reason Luiz just decides to bring out his WWE actions and just double fly elbow hit Kudus into the back. Obviously Kudus reacts angrily, as you probably would if you were double elbowed in the back. And you know what? I'm not gonna sit here and say Kudus shouldn't have been booked in that situation, because it was it's the reaction you're going to get a booking for. But is there not more in it for Douglas Luiz there, who's played? I mean, by the letter of the law, is that not just a sending off?
It's very confusing because I watched the Inter Atletico game during the week, and there was a very clear. If anyone watched it, Marcus Thuram against second.
He was just doing a medical check. That's all he was doing. He was just making sure everything was fine medically.
But the reason I bring it up is not just because it's quite funny, but also because there's 2 very clear red card offences within the space of a week that VAR could have checked, and in the Inter case did actually check, but just decided no, it's not a red card. Mm-hmm. But by the letter of the law that these refs should be following, they do nothing. And look, Kudus definitely deserved a yellow card because the reaction is unacceptable. I get that if someone elbows you, you're going to be a bit annoyed. And, I've had it happen to me at work. But the fact is that if you're getting paid for it, you have to calm down. You have to be controlled in yourself. And that if you react, you stand just as much of a chance of getting sent off or booked as the other man. But the fact that VAR didn't intervene and say, actually, look, the reason that you need to upgrade his yellow card to a red card or, basically send off Luiz here is because He's double elbowed him. It's completely unacceptable. It's violent conduct, and it is a red card. You know, however soft it might have been, because I don't think he doesn't put any force into it. Really, it's just that. But that's not the point. It is a red card offence, and technically, it is violent conduct. So, why the VAR official isn't getting involved is nothing but ineptitude and incompetence. It's completely unacceptable that if you're supposed to have a video official there, they're not dealing with things like this, because these are the big things that this exact system was brought in for, to stop referees looking silly.
Yeah, no, they lost the game. They lost control of the game, and it happens way too much in English football. I think referees just lose situations way too easily.
He couldn't handle the atmosphere. He couldn't handle the pace of the game in the second half, and he couldn't handle the atmosphere. And again, David Luiz was lucky to be on the pitch anyway, because at the very end
Douglas
of the game,
Luiz, not David Luiz.
He was one who had the
David Luiz got hair like me, mate.
Yeah, no, sorry. Douglas Luiz, not Sideshow Bob. He committed the foul that led to the other really controversial moment, which obviously there's another moment before that was annoying as well. But like he siphoned down, I think, Kudus already on a yellow card. Again, the crowd are baying for the yellow, which should have been given. The ref bottled that. He bottled two massive decisions. One that Douglas Luiz would have made no difference because of the point of the game it was. But however, it was a yellow card. It should have been a red card. And I'm not. Yeah. I don't like saying players should be sent off. And I know it sounds like clutching straws.
I mean, we say it wouldn't have made a difference, Mike. It was the 86th minute. I mean, we had 7 minutes at a time, so there was like another 11 minutes to play in that situation. So it does make a difference.
But what also is like, again, but to move away from the referee for a moment, Kudus had a brilliant moment, and I think indecision and being on the right side absolutely killed him. I think they had a corner. He dinks it past Tillemans, and he's basically running through, clean on goal with one defender, Bowen on one side, I think, and then Martinez is way off his line. Martinez absolutely dropped a brick because he realised if he lobs me, I'm done. I'm not getting there, because it must have been funny being at the other end, because the panic in his eyes must have been quite a sight. But I think because it's on the right hand side, and Kudus would have had to slightly run round the ball to hit it, he kind of just doesn't do it. He should, like, no West Ham fan would have been against Kudus hitting it from that halfway line to try and lob the goalkeeper. And even if it would have missed, people would have gone, it's unlucky, but he's right to make that choice.
Yeah.
But when he got towards it, again, indecision struck him. He then lost the ball on the edge of their area when we still had a really good point between him and Thingy. Nearly changed it when he managed to get down the line and lay it back to Ward-Prowse, who then just hits it dead straight. Why not? Van Gaal would always say, when you're in the area, take a touch. Essentially, because that touch you could use to dummy, put a player on his arse, trying to block the ball. But you also maximise your opportunity to score. I think the percentage goes up exponentially by having a touch before you shoot in the area. But again, it was a nothing shot. He just kind of just hit it directly at the player. Great defending, great block, not disputing that. But it's those things, because it was a poor shot selection from a player who has been very good in front of goal for us this season.
Yeah.
It was just an awful selection after all the hard work of the whole team to keep us in that second half and to generate that opportunity. It was just so wasteful and frustrating. Again,
I think that's what's most frustrating as well. Even in that second half, we had the best of chances, really. I know Areola made a couple of good saves, but by and large, we had the clear-cut opportunities to win the game in the second half, regardless of the VAR controversy, which it ended with. But I think, before we finish up with that last, obviously chalked off goal from technically Bowen, we'll kind of just summarise what happened in that second half, because I think it's a mixture of both things, right? I think Emre was very good and very proactive in his substitutions, and what he wanted to tweak and finding areas to exploit from West Ham's defensive perspective. I think as well, in combination with that, we sat back way too deep. I think we notoriously do that when we're leading, regardless of the opposition. I think more so when we're playing higher quality. So if you're playing like an Arsenal or Liverpool and you take the lead, fans kind of justify it, because you're kind of digging in and you're trying to hit them on the break. And I think that's what we did with Aston Villa. I think because they're sat fourth in the league and because of the season they've currently had, that instinct from Moyes at halftime was like, we don't lose this now from this position. We try and hold on to that clean sheet and hit them on the break when we can. And I think that tweak mentally for the players at halftime was enough to say, okay, we can drop off another 5 yards and maybe be less intense with our pressing. Because I think in the first half we were excellent at that and we were pressing them really high. But obviously we're gonna be tired as well. I think the fatigue definitely set in. I think it's why Antonio came off on 65 minutes. Otherwise, he wouldn't have come off. There's no reason for Moyes to bring him off unless he's really fatigued, which I think is what was the case there. So again, it comes down to the substitutions, bringing Ben Johnson on, and how he brought Ben Johnson on was the main issue for me. And then, we weren't clinical enough in those moments where Kudus, to be fair to him, creates the moment for himself. But then you've got to be clinical. And same with James Ward-Prowse, who's got to be clinical in front of goal. So it got to the point where it's 1-1. I think there was, 7 minutes added. We get a free kick on the right-hand side. Ward-Prowse is over it. It's going to be a good delivery into the box. And it was. And then it was just kind of pinballing in the box. And it ends up going in. You think you've won the game 2-1 right at the end. And then there's the longest VAR check in Premier League history, which I don't think any West Ham fan is going to be surprised at. But yeah, what are your thoughts on how that was disallowed? I know we had our back and forths in the WhatsApp chat yesterday on kind of the letter of the law and whether it should have been disallowed. Sloth, I'll start with you. What's your take on that last minute goal from Jared Bowen being chalked off by VAR after almost 6 minutes of a check?
We gain a direct advantage from it coming off Souček's arm. Whether it's intentional or not is irrelevant. We gain a direct advantage from it coming off Souček's arm and then hitting Jared Bowen. Now, for me, and by the letter of the law, I would deem that to be a correctly ruled out goal. It's unfortunate, it's annoying, but we gain a clear advantage from it coming back and hitting Souček's arm and then hitting Bowen. So as opposed to earlier where we were talking about intent, because this directly leads to a goal, it should be ruled out.
Is that the case when you consider, firstly, that VAR is there to intervene into clear and obvious errors by their standpoint? So not something that's micro looked at from 10 different angles for 6 minutes. And also the fact that the way Souček handles the ball, A, is it intentional? And B, because
it's irrelevant if it's intentional or not, because it directly leads to a goal. So look, it's one thing to the ball comes back, hits your arm and goes in, because if it's just down by your side, regardless, it's hit your arm and gone in. You've gained an advantage by handling the ball, whether intentional or not. That is what that law is now stating. So it's irrelevant. The fact that it hits Bowen after, again, irrelevant. Regardless of what Antonio thinks he's been told, we have gained an advantage by hitting our own player's arm. Therefore, the goal cannot stand because it directly leads to a goal. That is my interpretation of the law, and that is why they would have ruled it out.
And I think this is the problem, right? Interpretation is the absolute key point. Clattenburg also said about the goals that by the letter of the law, if you look at both incidents, you would be hard pressed, again, by the letter of the law to say that it was an incorrect decision, with that. So it was correct by the letter of law to disallow. However, an example of where a direct handball has been beneficial to us and then gone on to score is Antonio against Nottingham Forest this season. However, they said, well, as it went to a second phase of play because Antonio had to have 2 shots, it wasn't ruled out.
A phase of play is different to a play and directly going in.
But what I'll also say is Now, the players have also been told something because Antonio has recited what he was told. So the players have been told that if you are the direct beneficiary, as in you, the player, so had Souček handballed and scored, it is ruled out. Regardless of accidental, intent, any of those things, it's essentially irrelevant. It touches your arm, touches your hand, it's a goal. Now, the point made to players was if there is an accidental contact and essentially the ball is then moved on to another, or the ball bounces to another player and they score, then the rule is different in that can be allowed. So by that interpretation, arguably speaking, that goal should have been given. As Souček falls to the floor,
I would completely disagree again.
But this is the
But it's also the angle, Sloth. It's also the different angles that they said. They said one angle wasn't nowhere near conclusive, and the other one was maybe it slightly touched his arm. There was no conclusive evidence on the footage.
It took so long until they showed the angle behind the goal. But the angle behind the goal cleared it up that it did hit his arm, and I don't know why it took them so long to do it. That for me is the key frustration. But when you see the angle behind the goal that they got to at the end of it, when it does clearly hit his arm and it goes down and hits bone and goes in, it's a clear advantage from hitting the arm, regardless of whether
it's a clear advantage. But I'm also going, but based on what the players are told, it's a conflict. It's a completely
it's not a conflict. It's not a conflict because what you're doing is you're conflating the issue of phase of play and another player scoring the goal with the issue of it hitting his arm. Now,
it hit my arm and I passed it. It's the same phase of play. That's the whole point.
But the issue is that the only reason it's hit Bowen is because it's hit his arm, it's fallen down onto Bowen and gone in. There's no other way. If it doesn't hit his arm, we don't get that. So for me, and by the letter of the law, which you're saying it's open to interpretation. I'm not quite sure how it is because it's clear that it hits his arm, hits bone, and goes in. It leads directly towards a goal. It's not a different phase of play. It's not a different phase of play because there's no touch taken to control it. There's nothing that delays it. It directly bounces off bone from the.
And I'm not saying about the phase of play because again, what Antonio is saying is what he's been told, and they've even said within the same phase of play that if you handled it and it was then to go on to your own teammate. Because you haven't because it's not you, the player, that's directly benefited it. So this is the problem.
It's the side
of telling players one thing and enacting another. What's also the problem is, and yes, VAR check every goal. However, you cannot state that you're there to do clear and obvious. You're there to also be fair, or be able to make this decision. If it's going to take you 6 minutes, and then it's inconclusive. Let's be honest, right? Inconclusive last week was Sander Berg. Sander Berg for us in the game for Burnley was inconclusive as to whether it hit his hand or head or whatever, and in which order that happened. They decided not to give a penalty. This one with Souček, again, from one angle it looks like it's hit his arm, one angle it doesn't. So again, you have multiple angles that are not giving you a truly, really conclusive argument, and you're having to interpret the way the ball has moved as to where it's hitting and where it's going.
I think there should be a time limit. I think there should be a time limit for VAR to see what's clearing, because you'd be there all day and keep looking at it.
It's basically what I was about to say. If you find it within 1 minute, within a minute or 1 to 2 minutes, you need to move on. You ruin the game of football.
And I'll be honest, guys, I don't really care if there's a time limit. Like it's disappointing and it's frustrating.
So how long can it go on for then?
But if the correct decision is reached at the end of this period, then that's what matters.
But this is
20 minutes. Is 20 minutes long enough?
10 minutes, 15 minutes, just to find it.
Stop.
So if we're in the Europa League final and there's a last minute decision that is for us, and we could potentially win the Europa League final, you're telling me that you're bothered of whether it takes 20 minutes and we win it if it's given for us. You're telling me that you're bothered.
That's completely different.
It's going to taint it a little bit.
It is different.
We're talking about the correct decision.
It's not that though, because this point would stand, right, if every single VAR thing they did led to a correct decision, and that's the issue here. It's up to interpretation because they're not being consistent with what they're doing. So there might be one week where we don't get that, but then we play Sheffield United a few weeks before that, where Bowen is rugby tackled to the floor, Areola actually gets punched in the face, and they get a penalty. So where does the kind of clear and obvious then come into?
I agree, but where is the time limit relevant in that? Because it doesn't, because it's not going to change.
It should be clear and obvious within a certain time frame.
It was to help with clear and obvious mistakes. It's if you can't see something within 2 minutes, it's not clear. Nor is it obvious.
No. But Mike, the reason they couldn't see it is because they didn't have the camera angle, because it wasn't available on the feed to them. That's why they couldn't see it. You know,
that's the point, right? It's not clear and obvious. They're having
no, it is, but it was clear. It was a very clear and obvious decision when they got the camera feed from behind the goal, but they had to wait for the feed to come to them. That is why it took so long. Now, look, I don't think there should be a time limit on VAR. I might change my mind if it's the last train home at a nighttime game, but the point is that they got to the correct decision at the end of it, however much we may not like it and are infuriated by other decisions that have gone against us. The problem is the inconsistency with the VAR officials. I completely agree with you, but the problem isn't that the VAR system doesn't work.
No, I've never said I've got a problem with VAR. VAR, I think, is perfectly fine.
But Mike, what I'm saying is that whether it takes 5 minutes or whether it takes 2 minutes, it's irrelevant if it gets you the right decision. Now, the reason it took slightly longer is because to get that camera feed, to be able to get the shot behind the goal, to give the correct decision, took slightly longer. So for me, I'm you know.
My question is, how they got that feed for Antonio, basically exactly the same point on the pitch, yet it took them 6 minutes for Souček's. So that's where I'm incredulous about it. It seems like a cop-out for them to say we needed that footage or we had to wait for that footage, because in the exact same area, an exact same point on the pitch, you were able to see an infinitesimally small deflection off of Antonio's hand to go in. And with this one, it took so much time. Again, I'm all for them getting decisions right. However, football is a game which is played at pace. It's not like rugby where you have these natural stops in games and you have these periods where you can maybe have a little bit longer review. However, even those reviews are a lot quicker than that. To be last nearly 6 minutes, it comes to the point, whether it's right or not, that they are looking for reasons to find a goal invalid, rather than the integrity. It just feels like the integrity of the game is slightly at odds with what they're looking to do with these.
But the reason that the video official in rugby is so much more efficient is because everything is transparent in rugby. You know, even if they still make controversial calls in rugby. You know, there have been, but
you're aware.
But the fact is that the referee, is mic'd up and he can hear. He has to talk, and that is broadcast as well. So everyone is privy to why they've made that decision, and referees are trained in that. That's what we need to do. You know, I know it's a slower game, rugby, but that's what the referees need to do. But they won't do that because it's a complete boys' club. It's incompetent, and they don't want to be seen to be opening themselves up to any sort of error. They don't want to be seen to be able to be broadcast to the world. And although they have released some of the conversations they've had over controversial decisions, to have it broadcast and scrutinized is a very different thing.
Look, we'll go around in circles on this. I think the bottom line is, technically, as Sloth's saying, it's handball for both goals. But technically as well, we should have had the first goal, which, where he's blown the whistle before Kudus has even shot, which is then why the frustration builds for these types of moments where they're taking 6 minutes to analyze whether it's glanced someone's arm, which again, he hasn't directly scored from, it's come from Bowen. So you then look at, okay, why have they not micro-analysed Doug Luiz putting 2 elbows into the back of Kudus? Why are we not getting more than 10 seconds look at that? It then elevates what's happening across the board. And, with VAR, there's
that
no
is frustrating, but nothing is ever solved in life by playing whataboutism. You know, what about that? What about that? What about that? Nothing's ever solved. So what we need to do is at the end of the season, or you know, the FA will probably be the end of the decade. They'll sit down and go, actually, we need to clear this up, lads. We need to make sure that it's working for everyone. But they won't do that.
Well, it's going to come to the point.
The problem is, though, this is the difference between millions and millions of pounds, because one position in the Premier League completely changes the revenue you're getting as a club, and it could be that we now finish. Look, there's been more than one decision that's gone against us this season, but it may be that we lose out on a couple of points to another team.
Man United. If you look at those decisions, arguably they could have put us to a point where we're above Man United and probably by at least 2 points.
Exactly, and that's the issue I have, because
and that's going to be worth an extra 5 million in probably places in the Premier League, but from a terms of you know, the other competition, you're probably looking at another 15 to 20. So those decisions could cost us nearly 25 to 30 million pounds.
I think the issue is as well, if you're going to bring in VAR, it has to be ready to be making clear and obvious errors almost within 2 minutes. It should not take a camera feed delayed, whatever they want to say, to bring about a decision that, again, is still quite inconclusive from multiple angles. If it's clear and obvious, it should be there in black and white. It shouldn't be there, you know, subjective from what angle you look at. It's like when the ball's over the line or whether it's not over the line, where they've got that wrong this season in the Newcastle-Arsenal game. From some camera angles, it looks like it's off. From some camera angles, it's on. So how do you have then a definitive, clear and obvious look of a camera for that sort of situation? Where does the guideline become a clear and obvious error? There isn't one.
All essentially in those regards, you know, when that tracker goes over the line and an alert is said. So if a goal is thing, you can actually go, no, it's past the line. You actually have like a Hawkeye essentially is what you kind of need in those respects. But
yeah.
What I find frustrating and what kind of you start to question the integrity of the referee when you then consider some of the things that have gone in the game. This was the same referee who, unbeknownst to anyone, appeared to believe there was a foul from Bowen on Mendy only, you know, a season ago, which was prevented us from getting, you know, I think, you know, there's every point at one point that decision from the referee could have potentially sent us down and got relegated, because that could have been 2 points or a vital point.
I mean, we're talking about Aston Villa. Goal line technology kept them up a few years ago by going wrong.
Absolutely, and it's the point of you. Then you start to question that integrity when that referee's already been involved in one incredibly controversial piece, which they've had to apologise for. You are still giving him games where he's refereeing against West Ham, and he turns up against West Ham, and I genuinely think that last minute one, if that was at Upton Park and he had to go and do the VAR right next to the crowd at Upton Park, that decision probably goes a different way. He probably goes with his on-field decision.
I don't think so. I don't think he's the one responsible for that decision.
The venom and the sheer level of fire you would get at Upton Park would influence.
Didn't change.
The Villa players also
it doesn't change what he's told from the VAR.
It doesn't change what he was told from the VAR. But VAR, VAR sent him for the monitor because they
show him
the decision.
No. It was to show him what had happened.
This is what I mean. They made the decision on Antonio. They said, absolutely, you need to. They basically turned around and went, look, it probably is, but you probably just want to go. You need to go and have a look and interpret it how you want and make a decision, because
that's the lack of accountability across the whole refereeing system.
Right? And that's why I'm so frustrated by it, because they took responsibility and said outright with the Antonio one, yep, handball. If they would have done that with a Souček, I would have taken it. However, they then turned to the referee and went, we can't really give a decision. We don't want to decide on this. We don't think there's enough here for us to outright say. So we're going to allow you to review the footage again and reinterpret it. And we're also going to play it in slow time, or so you can then mull over it, see it not in the kind of rate of play. And that's what really is frustrating me. I don't have a problem as such with the right decision. It's the time that it took to get there, and the lack of transparency you get as fans is unacceptable.
I think that's the key point, isn't it? That's the key point there, the lack of transparency.
And this is a referee who's already had major controversy against West Ham, and the FA had to apologise about his officiating to West Ham. and he is still officiating in games against West Ham, and he's involved in controversy again against West Ham, and big calls wrong again. So you just, when people say corrupt, I always take it tongue in cheek, and I don't agree with it. I'm not saying it's corrupt, but the sheer level of incompetency has led to Nottingham Forest employing an ex-referee to review their games so they can catalogue the potential errors or misinterpretation of rules to put back. It's going to come to a point where probably every team is going to do that. And it's probably going to come to a point where it's not there yet, but someone at some point is going to file a lawsuit, because they're going to say you have things like VAR, which to stop them. You've made an apology. That cost us 3 points, 2 points, what have you. And we got relegated. That's cost us £60 million. We're going to sue you for £60 million in damages, and they're going to go, but they won't go to the FA. They'll go to Pogmol and say, you, due to your incompetence, and you've also admitted wrong, they can say you're now liable. And these are the things that could potentially happen because of the sheer level of incompetency and lack of transparency.
I think we just need clarification and transparency. I think that's it. I think the first thing is we need clarification on what the rule is for that last goal of Souček, because we're being told, like Sloth sat here saying this is the rule. Antonio's been told something different as a player. So we're just being told different things. So whether it's actually the law or whatever it is, it needs to be transparent, not only to fans but to players and to managers, and so everyone at the beginning of the season knows exactly what's happening. There's no changes mid-season with the VAR or how they're handling things. Everything's completely transparent. Everything stays consistent throughout the season, and you review it again at the end of the year if you need to tweak things. It's the same thing with offsides. How they said they'll keep the flag down until the phase of play ends. They're not being consistent with that anymore, as we saw with Bowen going through on goal yesterday against Villa. He was flagged straight away, whereas Aston Villa were given a complete advantage for about 30 seconds before the flag went up. So it's the lack of consistency, it's the lack of transparency about what's going on. Okay, if VAR is going to get the right decision on those kind of handballs or offsides, fantastic. That's what it's brought in for. But then why are you blowing your whistle before the ball is struck by Kudus, so then VAR can't take a look at it? Why are you not using VAR to take a look if a player's elbowed someone in the back with 2 elbows? It's the lack of consistency that they're using VAR to apply to it, which is the issue. It's not the technology. They're just not ready to use it, and they're not capable of using it to the positives that it should be used at. That is the key point there. It's the referee. It will always come back to the referees in charge of it, not the actual whatever's being used, because they're just not capable. They're not capable of doing it. This has become such a multi-million pound business. It's not even about just fan stuff anymore. This is business talk, and ultimately, you can say about corruption or whatever it is, but referees have openly said that in specific environments in the past, they would give certain decisions or they would do things. And things have come out where, I don't know I think it was Liverpool Spurs. He said, I don't know if it's actually his handball. I'm going to give it anyway. And that came out on feed. I think Howard Webb or Mark Clattenburger said that he openly used to give decisions to Man United in their favour at Old Trafford. So I'm not going to sit here and say there isn't anything going on underneath the surface, because it's been proven to be the case multiple times in the Premier League. And now money's at such a high point, it's probably going on to a larger extent. We just don't know about it. That's my
Chris Wilder this year said, I can't remember which game it was, but the referee told him, you're not going to get much here today. What the hell is a referee turning around to a manager saying, I'm not going to give you many decisions, or you're not going to get many decisions here today?
Ridiculous.
How can, it's those types of things that you hear as fans, and regardless of whether some of this is happening or not, or, I don't believe there is corruption. I think that's just way too over the top to say there's corruption. I just think it's just such a level of incompetency, a level of bias, and just a level of keeping the status quo as and where they can.
I think that's what it is. It's bias, not corruption.
Narratives.
I think that's what it. Because if you, I mean, we all probably played football. You would remember going to certain teams and having certain referees and thinking, we're not going to get much today. You know, we're going to struggle to get any decisions. Don't give the ref any lip. Don't give him any decisions to make, because likelihood is we're not going to get it. And I think that's run throughout the Premier League. And, you know, again, Old Trafford being an example, but look, let's park that, because I think by and large the point was good for us. It's frustrating that we didn't get all three. And I think, again, it comes that the frustration has built up for me that we haven't capitalized in our home games this season. Not Villa at home, but Burnley at home, you know, the week before, you know, Brentford at home, you know, Everton at home, Palace at home. They're the ones where we've dropped points. You know, Villa at home should be a good point for us.
Yeah,
we should have had.
Yeah, I called it a draw. Yeah, the day before, so I should be happy with that, because it's a draw. It's a good game, had a good ebb and flow.
Just the context of it.
Yeah, and arguably a draw is a fair result based on how both teams played. You know, in each half. Yes, we created better chances. However, on the state of play, both teams made really one clear chance, and both teams took it. So, you know, Villa deserved their draw. Villa played very well in the second half in possession and how they caused us problems. You know, had we not have Alvarez, I think we'd have been in a lot bigger problem, because he was brilliant at times. But, you know, we're not here actually talking about an entertaining game of football as we should do, because it was a good entertaining game of football. We're instead talking about the referees, the incompetence behind VAR, not VAR itself. I don't think that's a problem. And that's not what we should be doing. We should be talking about what was a good, entertaining game played by two teams intent on attacking each other. Granted, it was only one half each, both of them doing it, but we're not talking about that. We're talking
I think
about
that's the point as well. Isn't it? We're a tactical breakdown channel. That's our thing, right? We like to analyze games. We'd have loved to analyze how Emery changed things in the second half and what we did so well in the first half in more detail. But again, we're just talking about, we've probably spent half the show talking about incorrect decisions or controversial decisions from VAR. So that's where it's also frustrating as a fan, because we can't just concentrate on the football. So look, let's park it for there. It's been a long stream. We got a good point against Villa. We're 7th in the league. I think we're gonna really struggle now to get Europe. I know top 8 might get Europe. I think if Liverpool, if City or Chelsea or United win the FA Cup and finish in the top 7 as well. So there is still the possibility that top 8 get it. But it's still going to be a struggle. I think without Alvarez now in our next few games, in domestically and in Europe, it's going to leave a big hole. And whether Phillips is going to be strong enough mentally and physically to come back from obviously not being picked for England over the international break and go straight into that team, or whether he wants to drop Souček deeper and put Ward-Prowse back in, that's something Moyes will have to think about over the next couple of weeks. And yeah, by and large, I think we created enough to win the game against Villa. I think most fans were frustrated that maybe we didn't give it a little bit more of a go in that second half, and we did succumb to Villa's pressure a little bit too easy. But again, credit to Emery and how he changed things in that second half, because it definitely had an impact on how we could progress with the ball and how much they were kind of suffocating us back as well. So tough game, good point on the balance of things, but frustrating not to take all three given the chances we had and obviously the controversy that happened throughout the game. But yeah, we're going to leave it there. Make sure to leave a like on the stream if you enjoyed. Thank you all for your contributions. I know we didn't get through many comments today, but next one will be better with that to stop and get your point of views throughout, because there was a lot of controversy today where we got overboiled with emotion, as always is with West Ham. But yeah, thank you for watching. Leave a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. And lads, until next time,
come on,
you
you
Lions.